What's happened in the past few months alone? A gas pipeline was supposedly hacked, the world's biggest meat producer was hacked, war in the Middle East, China being China, conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, inflation. This is bad, right? What if I told you there's been a never-ending cycle in history that has always followed the same beats? There's good times and there's bad times, and like the seasons, winter is coming. So the question is, when will the bad times kick off, and how do we survive the long winter? This is America's Next Date with Destiny. This has all happened before, and it will happen again. So I recently picked up a book called The Fourth Turning, published in 1997 by William Strauss and Neil Howell, political strategists and economists. And the book talks about how America goes through a nation-changing crisis roughly every 80 years. 1773, the American Revolution kicks off. 88 years later, 1861, the American Civil War erupts. Add another 80 years, Pearl Harbor is bombed, kicking off America's entry into World War II. What's 80 years after that? Let's see, 1941 plus 80 equals 2021. Let's break this down. According to the book, this 80-year cycle is called a saeculum, and within each saeculum are 4 turnings, each of which lasts about 20 years. Think of them as seasons. The high, it's our spring. An awakening, our summer. An unraveling, the fall. What's happened so far is just a big setup for what's next, and if you don't prepare at this point, we hit the crisis, the long winter, which starts with a spark and usually leads to every fourth turning since the 15th century has culminated in total war. And like the seasons, this cycle will keep repeating. So let's focus on this current cycle, the first turning, the high. This is an era when institutions are strong and individualism is weak. 1946, America had just won the war and was entering a new golden age of TV, technology, education, and infrastructure. Trust in the government and the collective was at an all-time high. All the GIs came back from the war with a renewed sense of creating stability for themselves and their children.
They reached the 1950s at a time when the U.S. was tremendously prosperous, when the economy was booming as we've never seen it before. And I think they reacted to that prosperity, and I think they reacted strongly to all of the trauma of the Depression and the war by turning inward a bit, by marrying young, by emphasizing home and family, as if that was something they couldn't get back in the 30s and 40s and now valued all the more.
During a first turning high, children are indulged, academies founded, soldiers knighted, kings crowned, and empires are proclaimed. But the high came to an abrupt halt when
we just have a report from our correspondent Dan Rather in Dallas that he has confirmed that President Kennedy is dead.
President Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. And then everything changed. The second turning, the awakening. This is when the generation born after the high rebel against the institutional conformity their parents raised them on. It was the consciousness revolution. Perfectly combed hair gave way to long hair, don't care. It was the age of Aquarius. There was Woodstock, hippies, psychedelics, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. There were movements for civil rights, women's rights. But at the same time, as the nation reached its peak in manned space travel with the Apollo 11 moon landing, the nation was in the midst of the divisive and bloody Vietnam War. The awakening ended with further distrust of all large institutions, and America was hit again with gas lines, Iran hostage crisis, plummeting dollar, and then the third turning, the unraveling, 1984 to 2008. Unravelings are the era of me, me, me. Greed is good. The mood of this era is in many ways the opposite of a high. Institutions are weak and distrusted, while individualism is strong and flourishing. This is where the term culture wars was dubbed and described as profound division over what kind of country we are, what kind of people we are, and what we mean by the American way of life. Specifically, the culture war between liberals and conservatives would hit hard and hit often, and we saw this in the entertainment of this time, with militarism and patriotism glorified in Top Gun, Rambo 1, 2, and 3. In contrast, there were searing condemnations of war with Platoon and Born on the 4th of July. We also had glorification of wealth and glamour with television shows like Dynasty and Dallas. But at the same time, films like Wall Street skewered the excesses of the rich. I mean, look at this bougie shit.
Pardon me, would you have any Grey Poupon? But of course.
It's an era of cynicism and bad manners. I mean, look at the music. We went from the high of the 40s era big band, representing the teamwork of America, coming together to create a single unified sound, to the unraveling with the rise of the pop star, the single individual which we reveled at their excess and fame, but relished as we watched their downfall. Opening up the wounds of America's racist past was the Rodney King trial of the officers that beat him, their acquittal, and the riots that followed. And in foreign affairs, we had the fall of one great enemy to the rise of a new one. And towards the end of the unraveling, the top-grossing movies were either about superheroes doing things no humans could, or about the end of the world as we know it. So let's get down to why we're here. Fourth turning, the crisis. Sometime before the year 2025, America will pass through a great gate in history, commensurate with the American Revolution, Civil War, and twin emergencies of the Great Depression and World War II. Each of the past three crises resolved the aggravating value struggles that had been building up over the prior saeculum. Remember, this is all cyclical, and the fourth turning is where all the questions and conflicts that have been building up the past 80 years comes to a head. So what aggravating value struggle has been building up in this cycle? What will be our great conflict? First, let's start what kicks off the crisis era. A catalyst, a spark that changes the mood.
It starts with a catalyst, and of course the catalyst was, like 1929, it was 2008. A sudden shock to our system. Say, okay, we're in a new place now. We're not in Kansas anymore.
Notice that Neil Howe didn't state that 9/11 was the catalyst that starts the fourth turning, but the 2008 financial crash. This was the change in mood. Millions lost their jobs, savings, and homes. And with that came the realization that institutions are not working for the people anymore, but for themselves.
Large institutions in America are broken, and simply in their effectiveness and their cost. I mean, a good example is higher education, broken. Our healthcare system, completely broken. I think antitrust in America is broken. I think regulation of social media is broken.
Remember the saeculum wheel? As time goes by in the cycle, we go from trust in the institutions to no trust. For me, it was the realization that I was now in the workforce with crushing school loan debt and the fact that I'll be paying this off for the rest of my life, and that institutions we trusted like higher education was just a big money-making scam.
The colleges are out there perpetuating this myth. Going to college is your ticket to success. Education at this point is a racket. I mean, most people will never recoup the cost of a college degree.
But then after graduating, we learned that a degree was not enough anymore. We have to get our master's now, go to grad school, go to law school, go to business school. And to do that, we have to take out more loans.
Now, since everybody goes to school, because it's, you get the money from the government, everybody's got a college degree, they mean nothing. So now you got to get a master's degree. You got to get a PhD. You're in school till you're in your 30s.
So on top of this scam, what else do we have? Skyrocketing national debt, a $6 trillion forever war, terrorist attacks all over the world, Occupy Wall Street, snowflakes, the Cubs won the World Series, Orange Man was elected president, then impeached again, riots last summer, the virus that shall not be named, and aliens. So back to the question I asked earlier. What is our aggravating value struggle? What will be our great conflict? Remember the book The Fourth Turning was written in 1997. Listen to what the authors have to say on what may happen. It's absolutely eerie. 1. There could be economic distress with mounting poverty and unemployment, trade wars, collapsing financial markets, and hyperinflation. 2. There could be social distress with violence fueled by class, race, nativism, or religion. 3. Cultural distress with the media plunging into a dizzying decay and a decency backlash in favor of state censorship. Next, technological distress with high-tech oligarchy and biogenetic chaos. 5. Ecological distress with energy or water shortages and new diseases. 6. Political distress with institutional collapse, open tax revolts, one-party hegemony, major constitutional change, secessionism, and authoritarianism. And finally, military distress with war against terrorists or foreign regimes equipped with weapons of mass destruction. It's downright prophetic.
What typically happens is crisis leads to crisis. So in other words, if crisis accentuates the dysfunction, you increase the likelihood of a next crisis. And what happens is that all these individual crises gradually combine into one single huge battle.
But if I had to pick one, War with Russia? Their GDP is the size of New York State, and they only have one aircraft carrier that's always out of commission. The most probable scenario is war with China. The virus that shall not be named has exacerbated relations between our two countries. Their missile tech is able to keep our Navy at bay while they achieve their goal of invading Taiwan. If that happens, the US and its allies will have no choice but to retaliate. Whatever happens in this war, it will answer the big question, which is better? America's version of government? Of the people, by the people, for the people? Or China's version of government? Of the people, by the people, but for the state? What's another scenario? Like Neil Howe said earlier, our institutions are broken and have been corrupted by greed. College is a money-making machine. Healthcare is a money-making machine. Even our entertainment industries are deeply corrupted. We were taught the rules of the game. Go to school, get a degree, get a job, get married, have kids, pay off your loans, retire. But then people at the top cheat and ruins the game for all of us. And when we have a generation of youths who have been scammed into debt to keep them slaves to the game, who's lost trust in the system, resentful that the game is rigged, it's a recipe for massive discontent and at worst, civil collapse. Because right now, the people are angry and all it takes is a little push. In the 30s and 40s, when the Depression hit and we were in the depths of World War II, people looked back at the raging 20s and reminisced on the good times, the parties, the music, the attitudes. Flash forward to now, us Gen Xers and Millennials now look back to the 80s and 90s and how good we had it. We had all the tech and all the culture, the music was amazing and groundbreaking, cell phones and internet was just becoming popular but not enough for us to be slaves to them. We still went outside and talked to people face to face. And when we're in the middle of our big crisis event, we're gonna look back at those decades with all the great things we had. All our freedoms, our comforts and opportunities, the crazy amount of technology at our fingertips, but most of all, the people we valued and took for granted before we became so divided over things that just didn't matter. And at that point, we will then realize those were the good times, and we should have been grateful for them. I didn't initially mean for this video to become so doom and gloom, so I want to end with a little hope. Remember, this is cyclical. After the winter comes the spring. Whatever happens, there will be an end and a new beginning, at least for whoever's left. All we can do is prepare to hunker down and get through the crisis. We'll tackle that in the next video, along with why the fourth turning keeps happening. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and like and comment so this video spreads far and wide through the YouTube algorithm. Thanks again.